So I want to talk today about fake news, how and why it can spread. I'm looking at this from a sort of cyber psychology perspective. So there may be or may not be some fake news throughout the presentation itself. Up to you to decide whether this is photoshopped or whether it's me hanging 360 metres above Toronto. I am a lecturer at Bournemouth University in cyber psychology and programming and recent runes. And this is Freud's couch in London, because a lot of people, when they think of psychology, think it's the kind of, about your childhood, that kind of stuff. And actually, it's not. Social science is still a science. It's just that the things that we're measuring are people, which are rather less well behaved than elements. So we work on a more probabilistic basis about what might happen. You can't say that, for example, Felix on a particular day in particular circumstances will do a particular thing, but you might say ACCU delegates as a whole might be more likely to do one thing than another. But you can't guarantee that any one person will. So when I'm talking about fake news, let's define my terms here. I'm talking about this kind of stuff, the stuff that's sort of deliberately masquerading as real news, trying to look like that. So for example, during the US presidential elections, this claim that Pope Francis was supporting Donald Trump. I'm not talking about spoof things like this one, where someone was claiming that Nigel Farage was going to put on, was it a white dress? Yeah, white dress, kind of Marilyn style, I think, singing happy birthday, Mr. President at the inauguration. So this one, I'm hopefully clearly a spoof. No, quite a different character to that one there. So, fake news itself is quite big news. Collins Dictionary Word of the Year in 2017. And they've defined it here as false stories disseminated under the guise of news, as if it's news, often sensationalist stuff. So they've got examples here like the Atlantic Ocean being too wet, for example, or pole dancing becoming an Olympic sport. So very much in the news in 2017 because of what happened in 2016 with the election. But it's not actually all that new. I mean, we used to call it probably more propaganda than fake news, but it's been around, as far as I can tell, since people have been communicating. It's hard to imagine people weren't being economical with the truth from as long as they were able to speak some kind of truth or falsehoods. So, for example, this poster back from World War II, encouraging people to eat particularly carrots because it's good for your sight. Now, this article from the Smithsonian says there's no carrots, or they are good for your eyes, but they can no more enhance your eyesight than eating blueberries turns you blue. However, spotting airplanes in the dark can be done quite effectively by radar. But you don't, when you've got a new bit of kit like that, you don't particularly want to tell your enemies, hey, we've got this amazing bit of kit where we can see your aircraft coming. Well, it's kind of benefit, isn't it? A, they're not suspecting you've done something clever. Yeah, B, they're going to go waste time and money on carrots. And meanwhile, you get away with quite successfully shooting them down in the air because you can see them coming. But yeah, it's a kind of like a decoy story. There's an explanation for this. The reason we're doing so well is we've been feeding all these carrots to people. So, not true, but done deliberately for a purpose to mislead. So, when I'm talking about this from a cyber psychology context, it's because the technology facilitates what we can do in communicating these stories, but it's interacting as it always has done through time with human behaviour. So way back in the past, it would be, maybe sort of getting the town crier to say something, printing a pamphlet on a big old printing press, maybe sort of launching yourself some kind of unauthorised radio station. It's gradually come into a more technological means of distribution of these stories, but it's still people communicating with other people in some way. So, what's new in how it's facilitated by technology? Well, two key things, I think. One, it's very much more easily disseminated. So now if you want to get this news around, you don't have to go and talk to 100 individuals. You can talk to everyone you're connected to. You don't have to go employ a town crier to go and tell it to everyone in the street. You don't have to get that printing done. It's also very, very easy to create. So again, get town crier to do it, hard work. Printing pamphlets costs money, costs time, and you've got to get the distribution sorted as well. So the easy dissemination, I mean, obviously via social media, and also it can be recreated verbatim here. I mean, if going word of mouth, the story can get somewhat garbled along the way and perhaps lose some of the impact of the rhetoric that was included in the first place. But also, really, really easy to do this way. I just click like, a load of people are going to see that I've liked what Russell has said. I click share, a load of people are going to see that content I've shared from Russell. Exactly as it stands there, and easy, just like that, no problem. And, and suddenly it's seen by, a massive 100 people. But that's still a lot quicker than it would take me to go around and talk to 100 people about it. So it'll easily spread through that network. If I share it and just 2 people look at it, and then for each of them, 2 people share it on. And granted, some of these people will be the same people because they're not completely, there's probably a posh word for it, isn't there? But not networks of completely separate individuals, not reconnected to each other. But that's still a fairly modest number of people. You can see that just if 2 people share that, and then each of those 2 people share it on from there, we pretty rapidly get a lot of people and one disembodied pair of legs for some reason. That wasn't intentional. So it spreads very fast. And also, it's not just humans spreading it. And really, this is just a gratuitous opportunity to put a zombie picture in here. But zombie botnets will help as well, right? It doesn't have to be humans spreading it. It's, zombie botnets will do it for you too. Or will spread all sorts of stuff without any humans having to get too involved. But yeah, that was just an opportunity to have that picture, really. So also, very easy to create. So you can spread it far and wide, very easier to click. But also, it's now very cheap and simple and accessible. You don't need a recording studio, you don't need broadcast cameras, you don't even need a printing press to do any of this. So it's very easy to do, and also there's kind of an incentive to do it. If you're creating clickbait type material, there's ad revenue to be had from it. You don't have to believe what you're saying at all. You just have to create something that someone will click on, and it's well worth their while doing. And there are teenagers in things with an M, somewhere in Eastern Europe, earn money doing exactly that. Quite a lot of money. So, easily created. This is a system I worked on in my very first job. It stored some video on RAM, in RAM. It was a technological breakthrough, so rather than broadcast quality stuff, rather than having to run up big tapes, which were very slow to load, it could actually store images in memory. Would you like to guess how much length of time it could store? Oh, lower. Twice that, 30 seconds, which actually was really useful. For editing adverts, you could get enough material, for a quick little advert, that still saves you an awful lot of effort with the tapes. And actually, this one's fake news as well, because that's not actually the system I worked on, because I couldn't find a picture of that. But it's that size, very similar keyboard and that size of rack for it. So it's near enough. Whereas last week, I created that. On this laptop, I could have done it on my phone. I could send that around the world. I'm not going to. You can spot how many ducks there are in my office, if you like. But it's that was 1987. I was working on the previous one. Here we are in 2018, and I can do that easy. And a lot of people can do it a lot better than I can as well, obviously. So the technology has really changed there. The human component interacts with that. So for all this to get spread, for it to work as fake news with that broad spread, you need to understand why people are seeing it in the first place, which is kind of obvious from the dissemination part, I think. And then, okay, it's appearing on their timeline or the feed or whatever. Why are they actually looking at it when it's there? And then having seen it, why are they sharing it? So why they encounter it, partly, is because they're operating in an echo chamber there. Another bit of fake news, the myth that ducks, quacks don't echo. This is a photo of the experiment that proves they actually do. They're just a bit quiet. So you stick a duck in the right conditions and test it properly. Turns out they do echo. So there you go. Quite a few ducks in this talk. It's like spotting magic last night, isn't it? So what you're connected with, the people you're connected with generally are people who share your interests in some way. The people you follow are probably people whose interests you share. If you're managing to follow someone or be connected to someone that you heartily disagree with, well done, because you're actually exposing yourself to something outside this. But I know this, and I'm not doing it because I just can't bear it. You know, it's a really hard thing to do. You don't naturally do it, and well, unless you kind of like to rant, and I don't like to rant, believe it or not. We also encounter it because regardless of what we're doing, those companies out there are trying to drive business, maximising their investment by driving you to content and getting in ad revenue. So they're very good at detecting what kind of things you might be interested in and shoving more of that and going, you know, click here and come and see some more ads. Which, you know, from the point of view of their business, a good idea, but in terms of distorting what you see in the world, quite... I want a better word than nasty, but you know, I can't think of the word I want. Not nice. And whatever I do in cyber psychology, whatever I talk about, it turns out there's always been a news story within recent weeks that's in some way relevant. So this Facebook scandal where they're collecting all these details about people's, ideas about people's personality and then presenting them with versions of the news story tailored to them, comes up, you know, just a couple of weeks before speaking here. There's always something. So thank them for that, for giving me some topical material, but there always is. So this stuff is appearing on your timeline. You don't have to click on it. You've got better things to do sometimes. But we do, quite more often than not. And one of the reasons behind this, I think, is confirmation bias, that tendency to go and look at the things, you know, that you already agree with and chime with what you already think. And then also be more swayed by those as well. So it's not, I wouldn't call it a failing. I mean, human beings have a lot of cognitive biases, the ways of thinking that are just unconscious shortcuts to help us get through. We've got limited processing capacity, right? We've got limited memory, and the way it fails is rather different to the way a computer fails. It just doesn't just do it more slowly. It sort of abandons bits, sort of doesn't remember things, doesn't process them at all, processes it a bit differently, and sort of does a quick hack in a way that computers will just slow down or stop altogether. We just muddle our way through. We're quite good at that, and it's a useful survival trait. And I'm not suggesting we should not have that. But it does affect how we attend to information and how we react to it. So there is some evidence, it's a bit contentious, and it seems to depend on the circumstances a bit, that says even if you do enable people to see the counter-argument and see something contrary to what they currently believe, there is sometimes a backfire effect where they're even more adamant about their own position, having seen that counter-argument. It doesn't seem to always hold true, but when it does hold true, one of the explanations is that it's just encouraged them to practice and rehearse and reiterate and get stronger in making their own argument against it. And that also assumes, of course, that they believe it's true. I mean, they might just bring down the shutters and say, well, you know, you're telling me other stuff, but I don't believe it. Anyway, but even if you believe it, it's still, yes, but it gives them that opportunity to practice that argument. There's also groupthink. If you're disagreeing with what people are saying, or just have some little qualms about it, it's very, very hard to be the person saying something different about it. If you haven't read about the Bay of Pigs situation, please do. That's widely attributed to a case of groupthink. So you've got, especially if you've got a particularly charismatic leader, but if everyone's saying one thing and you're going, yeah, but, there's this, you're one little buffalo trying to go this way and all the other buffalo are stampeding that way, it's quite hard to be that one person that stands out. And even if you try to, it's quite hard to get heard, and they'll go, oh, no, we're fine, and they'll all rush on without you. So that's a reason we share it and don't resist it and say, yeah, but no, actually I disagree with it. It's more likely to go along with the crowd and share it to a point. And finally, it may seem irrational to be sharing this stuff. It's random, quite some otherwise apparently rational people sharing stuff off the internet without much of a clear pedigree to it and passing it on, not really knowing sort of what kind of background it's got to it. But it's not about the content of it. They're expressing ideas in common with other people in their group and expressing their identity as a member of that group. So Kahan there describing much too tiny type, describes this as ideologically motivated cognition. So it's not that they're thinking about the rationale in it, they're thinking about just sharing it with their group, and that identity is very, as a member of a group, is very important. So he describes it as expressively rational. So to sum up, the fake news, the spread of it, the fake news itself, nothing new. The spread of it, very much facilitated by how easy it is to create and spread it. And that interacts with human behaviour, where your cognitive biases mean you focus on a small amount of stuff rather than looking at all the details, and the environment about you, what are other people saying. So while everyone's saying, oh, cute little duck on the surface, nobody's looking really under the surface at, oh, you know, how are the legs working and things like that, not paying close attention to those. And also, because you're part of a flock, that sharing is expressively rational. So I'd just like to leave you with a link to a quiz where you can test your own perceptions of news about the American election. Thank you for listening.